Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and what's next. It's a show that asks questions and peels back the layers of our average everyday experience and goes beyond scratching the surface. We interview people doing incredible things who are making a difference around the globe. Join me as we listen in and get one step closer to understanding that big ideas shared create collaboration. Collaboration can inspire community, and communities create social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. So my next interview is with CJ Hunt, and he has made a new film called The Neutral Ground. You're going to want to see this. It's coming up at the Tribeca Film Festival. It's going to be there, I think, for about 10, 12 days, something along those lines. It's going to be on PBS sometime in July of this year. I'm sure it's going to be on video on demand at some point. It's a film you're going to want to see. You're going to want to see it because, I learned a ton from this film. I also laughed out loud. This is a film that brings comedy and real life and the absurd together in a way that is thoughtful and meaningful, and I think it's going to change the conversation. CJ and I had a great time. I hope he did. I had a great time. I hope CJ did as well. You're going to find out why CJ sort of leans toward large microphones, and I'm just going to let that one sit. But you are going to want to listen in. Hopefully I've already got you hooked in some way. This is a film about America. It's about North America. It's really about the globe. And check out the trailer online. You can find it on the PBS website. I'm sure that it's out there in other places as well. But like I said, it's a real thoughtful and fun commentary on race in America. We talk about hope. We talk about cynicism and why it matters to tell the truth. And we talk about history, and we talk about a better understanding of history. We talk about worldview and about ideology and about this thing called white supremacy. And I think CJ gives a beautiful definition of really what it's all about. And so often it seems to me, I've got this love for philosophy, and as some of my listeners will know, and it really does come down to definition. And so what I think is so beautiful about what started out for CJ as as he says, a 5 to 10 minute satirical piece that he might use on a show like The Daily Show, which he's a producer on, by the way. Little shout out for The Daily Show. And also there's a shout out to librarians as well. And so you're there you go. There's a few shout outs going on in this interview. But this is a conversation about education, and it's about the future. And it's also, wow, is it ever about the present as well? But it really is about this hope in the future. And this beautiful line that CJ uses, it's about being honest, it's being out loud, and it's being in public. So honest, out loud, in public. And I hope you're going to listen into the interview to find out more about what CJ means there, but also going to check out the film, The Neutral Ground. I had so much fun with this. I hope I can say that, CJ, but it really was a lot of fun. And boy, I learned a ton, and it peeled back a few layers for me about what's going on in the real world. Don't forget davidpecklive.com for more information about my writing and my speaking and my podcasting. You can find it all there under the one umbrella. Now, face-to-facelive.ca is going to take you there. But lots coming up, and this you can find out about my copy of my book, Real Change is Incremental, but also you can advertise with us. I mean, there's so many things. Sign up for the newsletter, but please leave us a review. That it just changes everything. An iTunes or Spotify review can go a long way. So stay tuned. Don't touch the dial. Coming right up, CJ Hunt talking about his new film, The Neutral Ground. Well, welcome to Face to Face. We are joined by a very special guest here with us today, and oddly, we are digitally face to face as per usual over the last, I guess, what is it now, 22 months in this crazy COVID era we live in. CJ Hunt is here with us today to talk about his, in my opinion, brilliant, fun, engaging, thoughtful new film, The Neutral Ground. And I've got to read the subtitle, but CJ, how about you say hello to our listeners?
Hello, David. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. I hope my dad is listening. Dad, you see, other people think that I'm brilliant and good, and they have the courage to tell me.
They have the courage to tell
You
me.
know?
Very funny. Dad, take note. And I love that he
Yeah,
makes it into the film, by the way. And
me too.
one of the more beautiful sort of human comedic moments, as far as I'm concerned. So CJ, let's be clear. This is a documentary about memory, monuments, and how to break up with the Confederacy. Is that, in short, that's not only is that the subtitle, but is that a good starting point for us?
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point. I am a comedian. I was about to say, I'm a comedian by training.
That's right.
My
Yes.
credits, my degree. No, that is what I've spent most of my life doing, being a comedian and making satire. But I think it is helpful in understanding the Confederacy because I think we all have had relationships in the past that we struggled to be really honest about. Breakups that happened a long time ago that were not fully over. Weirdly, we kept all their stuff, we kept it in the living room, and now it's kind of weird that we've held on to it. And I think that that's a helpful analogy for how we deal with this nation that once seceded from us, where we kept their stuff and we don't necessarily tell an honest story about what that relationship
Yeah.
broke up over.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. I've got I'm a bit of an academic. I
Hmm.
was majored in
By training,
philosophy. Yeah, I've got notes all over my desk. I got post-it notes up on my screen here. I don't know where to start. Like I learned so much from this film. I mean,
I'm glad.
the fact that you tell us out of the gate you wanted to be a middle school teacher. And I think you say something like you were going to start as a middle school teacher and then become a comedian, which I just find hysterical. That in itself is pretty humorous. But can you tell me a little bit more about this? Because I didn't feel like I was being preached to in any way. It was fun. It was horrifying at points, to be honest with you, and
Hmm.
yet incredibly thoughtful. And as I said, I learned a ton.
Yeah. I think it is. I wanted to make a movie that was fun, a movie that felt pop culture and really accessible and digestible to everyone. Because when you say, "Hey, David, why don't you come over? Let's watch a documentary," I think people's first reaction is like, "Oh, I got to steel myself. I got to get ready to be sad or depressed or to go on a harrowing
Or worse,
journey."
convicted.
Yes. Yeah. It's like, what musicians am I going to have to stop listening to because I realize that they're monsters? So I think that people feel like they need to gear up for a documentary,
Right.
especially when you say, hey, I made a documentary about the Confederacy and the legacy of slavery and how it still haunts us. It's like, oh my God. But I wanted to make a movie that didn't feel like it had that barrier of entry and felt like we could ride in on things that are funny and sort of a voice that can carry you somewhere. And then once you're on the ride, then you're like, ooh, we are learning some heavy, harrowing stuff about America. So yeah,
Can I
so
ask
that's what we
you
yeah.
what? So one thing I just want to get out of off the plate right away is why did you use such a big microphone? Any reason for that? Is
Because
it's got to be one of the biggest
I
mics I've
want
seen.
this is the hard hitting questions, David. This is the thing that other interviewers are afraid to ask.
There you
um
go. Yeah.
I mean, the film starts in 2015,
Yep.
and I'm using such a big microphone because I don't know anything about film. So I had asked my cameraman, "Hey, can we just take the mic off the top of the camera and maybe I hold it
Nice.
like an interviewer?"
I
And he was
like
like,
it.
"That doesn't work." And he was like, and I was like, "No, trust me, it'll work." And it
It's
did
gonna
not.
work.
It like busted half of our interviews. But in 2015, I was a
Funny.
comedian who did not know anything about filmmaking. I had been living in New Orleans for about 8 years.
Yep.
I grew up, in New England, learning that the Civil War was about slavery, which is true. Spoiler. But I moved to New
Major
Orleans
spoiler.
after major spoiler, guys. I had moved to New Orleans after graduation to become a middle school teacher. I stayed on and taught. Once my kids were like, "You are not good at this," I then taught after school. I taught comedy after school. I was becoming a comedian. I was working for the public defender and really just as a day job. And then at night, just really trying to become a comedian. So in 2015, after the massacre in Charleston, where Dylan Roof massacred 9 people in a church, the whole country was asking, what are we going to do with these leftovers of the Confederacy? And New Orleans, our white mayor, Mitch Landrieu, said, hey, we're going to take down 4 Confederate monuments. And the comedian that I was at the time, I was like, ooh, this would make a fun piece. Like, let me
Right.
make like a 5 to 10 minute,
Short.
late night short field piece about people who think that moving a monument somehow destroys history. It'll be easy. I'll go in, I'll film the meeting, I'll film some people outside with my big microphone. They'll scream and shout about how we're destroying history and Robert E. Lee was a great man. We'll get that, and then we'll film the monuments coming down. That's what we tried to do. The only problem was the monuments weren't coming down because the city was sued and someone allegedly firebombed the contractor's car. So now we're sitting with a situation that the short is not happening, the removal is not happening, and literally no one is brave enough to take down the actual monuments, even though the city has decided, because there's the threat of vigilante violence. And that's where the film begins.
Yeah, there's so many wonderful moments, CJ, in the film, but they couldn't find a crane at one point, right? I
Yeah.
mean, just these simple, harsh realities of just how deep some of this stuff actually really goes.
Yeah, Mitch Landrieu says, I'm the relatively powerful mayor of a city that is spending billions on reconstruction. It's New Orleans, so they're rebuilding the whole city, and he's like, I can't even find a crane. And he says, in the film, that this is what institutional racism looks like. That you can pass anything, but if you don't have the power and you don't have the literal machinery to move the thing, you're out of luck. And I think that, some people fixate on the beginning of the film with the burning Lamborghini as a sign of white supremacy. But also, I think the more accurate sign is a missing crane. The idea that we're not going to burn a cross in your yard, but we're going to make for damn sure that you will not get to do whatever you want with racial justice because we know all of the companies and contractors and people who can remove a monument in this city.
Yeah, it really is mind-boggling. Hey, just because I want to get another one of those, really important questions out of the way before I ask you about white
Let's do it.
supremacy. Are you eating a half moon when you're sitting around at the reenactment with a historian and a few fellow reenactors? Is how what?
Thank you. Thank
And I
you.
love your beat, CJ.
This is
It's
for your this
hysterical.
is
You're in
for
the
the
middle of this
hard-hitting snack-based portion of
of the
the
film
interview. Yeah.
of the like you're in the middle of this profound moment with these guys. I think you even say at one point, this was kind of fun,
Yeah.
unexpectedly so, until you started to have this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. To be eating, you know, Little Debbie's, shout out to Little Debbie's. I don't know. We can't do that. But to be eating, all your favorite junk food and to be eating chili and to have folks cooking for you on an open campfire. I grew up in Massachusetts in the New England area. So that's my vibe. I'm like, let's be out at a James Taylor concert style. The families are out with the chairs and the barbecues and the blankets and all that stuff. So the idea of camping out for the weekend where everyone's in costume and offering each other food, that's amazing. And I get why people who like to reenact the Civil War, I totally get it. That stuff is
I can
fun.
get it. I can get
It
it.
just happens to be that what they are reenacting, they believe to be not political at all and based in a history where slavery didn't cause the war and was actually pretty fun. And they're pretty open about that in the scene. So that was sort of the get out, sunken placeness of that
Well,
event.
it's just so in the moment, so candid. So I mean, kind of. I don't know if you were going for the satire of that, but it was definitely evident for me, and it just this nonchalant. So tell me more, kind of an approach,
Yeah.
which
Great.
was
Slavery
beautiful.
was pretty good. Tell me about that.
Yeah, tell me about that. What does Christy Coleman say? It's a beautiful story. It's just not true.
Christy Coleman is amazing. Christy
Oh, she's
Coleman,
unbelievable.
is was the CEO of the American Civil War Museum. And yeah, she says the Lost Cause is a beautiful story. This story that, we had this glorious past and this perfect balance of relationships, and all of a sudden it was gone with the wind because the North came down and imposed their things, and slavery wasn't that bad. It's a beautiful story. It's just not true. And I think that could be the slogan for the Confederacy. It is a beautiful story about people who are just fighting for home, for honor. That's it. Most of them didn't own slaves. Most of them didn't care about race and they just wanted to protect their home. That story is a lot better than the real story of what folks wrote down about how deeply the Confederacy, you have Confederate leaders being like, yo, we are protecting slavery. That's why we're seceding.
Sure.
If you take away slavery, you destroy our ability to make money. That's what these people wrote down. But that's not a fun story. It's not a beautiful story. And I think the film is asking folks to navigate what happens when you base your identity on a story that happens not to be true.
Yeah, I mean, you get into the documentation of it as well. This isn't just an anti-narrative to this beautiful story. No, no, hang on a minute. Let's look at some of these documents. Let's look at
Yeah.
what some of these leaders actually saw, and we are literally putting them up on a pedestal in profound ways that actually are full of meaning.
Yeah. I mean, I think, even for most of my life, I was not very prepared for how to respond when someone says it wasn't about slavery. Do you feel prepared to respond to that as a person?
Uh, Not well. You know what? I don't know. Not really. I mean, I don't.
Right? I
No,
think most
I
of
mean,
us are like, yeah, but it was. And
right.
then when they would say, no, it's not, Robert E. Lee wrote a letter. He's fighting for home. I feel like most Northerners, or I'll at least just speak for myself, I feel like I've spent most of my life pretty deeply unprepared for how to respond to that old
You,
myth.
CJ, when you say unprepared, you mean you couldn't pull out quotes, or you
I
didn't
can
have like,
say
"Well, here, look at this
I can say
document."
you're wrong. I can say
Right.
that's not true. I can
Sure.
say you're in fantasy land. I can say this is racist. But in terms of being able to pull out evidence, to go back into the archives and have receipts, to be able to respond to it in a way that is deeply irrefutable, I feel like I have no arrows in my quiver. And the goal of the film is to make sure that people feel like you have arrows in the quiver. Whether you are in a small town that's still debating whether to take down a monument to faithful slaves, or whether you are a kid and your teacher is teaching the whole class that, it was just about states' rights. I want you to watch the film and feel like you can go to any number of documents that are in the film where this evidence is just right in front of us. If you Google secession documents, the first things that come up are the individual
Mm.
declarations of causes that, the forefathers of the Confederacy were like the forefathers of America. They declared their reasons. And in almost every first sentence of these things, you see them be like, we're going to make our causes clear. We are firmly identified with the institution of slavery. It is the greatest material wealth on earth. Like they are not ashamed, and they're not scared to say
Right.
that secession is about slavery. It's only after the war that the South starts rewriting that story. And that story was literally written in stone, and we are still trying to undo it from the land now. That's what the film's about.
It's fascinating the UDC and how children are involved and the flag raisings, and just so, talk about your pedagogical background coming to the forefront, as a school teacher, like just the connections there, right? I guess
Yeah.
your teaching career ended when you started trying out all your stand up with the kids. Is that what happened? Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of existed side by side. The kids were
What's
like, "We think you want us to like you too much. You're a pretty fragile man who really wants an audience's approval."
Yeah.
And I was like,
Not much of a teacher, but boy, he's a funny
I
guy.
was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, I really do care about audience approval," which makes for not a great classroom teacher, but it does
That's
make for
right.
a comedian who will work hard.
That's
So
funny.
I continued teaching kids comedy, which felt like a better fit for me as
Well,
I
you
was
know what?
pursuing
I
my
mean,
own thing.
anyone who doesn't think that comedy can teach, I think they need to go back and look at the documents and
Just
look
yeah.
look at the history of comedy.
And it's not like we're trying to dress the Confederacy up as funny. I don't even still describe the film as a comedy. I
Right.
just describe it as a documentary about the absurdities of the Confederacy. It is naturally funny that when people are defending the Confederacy, they will try to say two things. They will try to say it wasn't about slavery, but also when you think about it, slavery wasn't that bad. That's
Uh,
silly. That
yeah.
is silly. If I was like, David, the breakup of my marriage had nothing to do with me cheating. But on the other hand, cheating isn't so bad. You
It's,
can't argue both of those
yeah.
things.
Yeah.
It seems so sketchy. Look, it had nothing to do at all with me stepping out and cheating with multiple women, but is that really that bad? Isn't it just a difference in definitions between my constitutional right to pursue other sexual partners? Like it is silly
Yeah.
to argue
Absurd.
both of those things. It is silly that losers would have the most statues in America. It is silly that you can write a story into stone and it stays up long enough that people forget that that was just a story. And so I think the film becomes comedic because you can't say these things out loud without either being horrified or laughing at how little sense they make.
Yeah, CJ, you touch on such an important point, the complicity of the North, of us all, frankly, right? And can we tie that to one of the funniest moments for me in the film, where you and your dad are having the conversation about you denying your youth, some of the parts of your youth, and he's like, no, it wasn't like that, and just the beat of that whole scene is quite funny, but it also is a real kind of wake up call to this thing called white supremacy, this thing called systemic racism, and just how deep some of these ideas and these perspectives can go. Can you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, I can. Shout out to librarians.
Nice.
I'm sponsored by librarians.com, but by Big Library. No, I'm kidding. But shout out to just librarians, because we wouldn't have been able to make this film without, the generosity of folks at
It's
like the
cool.
Historic New Orleans collection and Tulane Special Collections, but just librarians who just let me come in and touch the documents with my hands and really dig into these primary sources.
So cool. I've done
And
570 interviews, CJ, and no one's ever done a shout out to librarians. I just need you
I'm
to know
trying to make this my lane, me and librarians. No, but we show so many documents in the film because we want students and anyone to realize you can do this at your local library, at your,
it's
historical
accessible.
preservation society. Like, they kept all of the receipts where they are talking about how much they're into slavery and how whites are the chosen race. Like, they kept all this stuff. And one of the best finds in the film was us finding a receipt of the Robert E. Lee Memorial Association paying Alexander Doyle, a sculptor from New York in the Hinsdale Doyle Company, to make the Robert E. Lee statue that stands 60 feet tall in New Orleans. And you can't think about that without thinking about the complicity of the North. That my whole version of this history was Confederate statues were built by a soured, angry group of white Southerners, and the North
Right.
just kind of looked away. They didn't just look away, they made some of these statues. They sent Northern representatives down that these statues weren't just put up in the night, that these were ceremonies of reconciliation. So, yeah, New York is where our Robert E. Lee statue came from in New Orleans. New York is the city where the guy who proposes to have written Dixie popularized the song Dixie before it then went down to Jefferson Davis's inauguration. The North has made so many of the minstrel songs that became so famous. Where do you think Birth of a Nation was shot? You think it was shot in the South? It was shot on a back lot in LA. Gone with the Wind, like all of these things that made the Confederacy in popular imagination. So much of that was made in the North. And I think that's what we are trying to hit home with this film, that this isn't just a shaking our heads at the Confederacy. This is
Right.
about the nation that chose to tell a different story about the Civil War, not a story about white people who would go to war to hold on to the ability to make black people property, not a story about a nation abandoning black freedom after the war, but a story just about white people who had just a difference of opinion and it's brothers and we can be friends again. So I think those scenes with my dad are about that, those are things that he drilled into me that became sort of a center of my identity, about the things that we tell about the nation's history are a lie. So what are you going to do with that lie?
Yeah, responsibility. What I think one of the things I love about your film, and there's so many things about it. By the way, I don't think I've said congratulations, but if it isn't evident, I love the film on so many levels, and I hope everyone sees it. And I think there's a
Do you love it as much as you love librarians?
I well, you know what, my wife's a librarian, so she's a teacher
So
librarian. So yeah,
so
so
you love the film as much as you love your wife. You've said it on
that's
radio.
right.
Thank you for saying that out loud.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice. And you know what? Sadly, I don't have a comeback for that.
Yeah, we need more arrows in the quiver.
We need more librarians, is what we need.
Yes, we need more librarians in the quiver. But
Um,
thank you for liking the film, and it's really nice to talk to you, because it's obvious that you are thinking a lot about it, and
Well,
I think I hope the things that you like are the things that audiences are going to really like.
I hope so too, CJ. And I mean, I hope there's a day when we can look back in our lifetime and know that a film like this, that this new story, it seems to me, that's being told about uh, global history, frankly,
Hmm.
colonialism, etc. What is this thing called white supremacy, and so on? Because we do need to unpack it. I hope we can look back and go, our kids are actually watching films like The Neutral Ground and so on, and saying, my perspective it has been now changed as a result. My worldview has been influenced by this, and now I can't go back. I think that's
Yeah.
the beautiful thing about your film and the story that you're telling.
I mean, I think not I think, my dad says that in the film. He goes, "Once you're awake, you can never go back to sleep." And I think that's what is so scary to folks about moving monuments, that I think that to acknowledge that, to to acknowledge that Robert E. Lee was fighting for the army of slavery. Who else do we have to take down? Do we then have to acknowledge that Thomas Jefferson was somebody who raped slaves? Do we then have to acknowledge that Columbus participated in one of the largest genocides in the world? Do we have to acknowledge that Andrew Jackson was the author of the Trail of Tears? That everything, we
It's
are so
kind of
invested
frightening,
in
right?
America about being like a story of these great men, and then when you realize that the men weren't so great and they were put up by people really invested in white supremacy, I think there is a genuine worry that the whole ball will unravel. And I think so when people ask, if we do this, what's next? They're not doing that in good faith. They're asking that question to stop a conversation. With this
Right.
film, we are seriously saying, yes, what is next?
Who's the historian who's sitting around the chili and the fire when you're eating the half moon or whatever the heck it is, and you've established you've developed a bit of a relationship with him, I believe,
Mhm.
throughout the film, and he's kind of I don't know, what would you call him? Kind
He's
of
not a historian. He is his name is Thomas Taylor, and
thank you.
he was at the time the Louisiana head of the Louisiana Sons of Confederate Veterans. And the Sons of Confederate Veterans are a membership-based organization about descendants of Confederate veterans. So I think the proper term is a heritage group, a Confederate heritage group.
Got it.
But they view themselves as historians and
Of
sort of
course.
history keepers. So yeah, part of
Right.
the
Right.
tension or journey of the film is that we couldn't find anyone who was a member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans who was suing New Orleans to keep the monuments in place. None of them were talking on camera. So we found the
Right.
highest ranking person in the state, Thomas, and we develop a relationship in the film because I think that he starts to believe that he can change me to his side. And I think as a filmmaker,
Right.
I started to believe that that if only another meeting, if only a new state of facts, if only a different
Sure.
level of personal relationship, that I can get him to change his mind. And I don't want to ruin how the film goes, but I do think that
No, for sure.
that part of the film, it, I have had people say how that relationship turns out really surprises me. And I think that is because we want not we Americans want stories like Green Book. We want to believe that when it comes to white supremacy, it's just a matter of realizing how much we have in common. And I think the relationship with Thomas Taylor in the film plays into what audiences come to expect when two people from different sides of the divide come together to talk about history.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, and I'm so glad you included it because I think it does show how deep these ideological kind of worldviews actually go, and how we all are in some way. I mean, who was it? Dostoevsky, who said, "We are all responsible, and I
Mm,
more than the rest." Like we're all a part of this, right? In
mm.
some right. So how can we actually push back against that status quo like mindset that where he when he responds to you and says, "Hey, what can I do? Can I go to like a jazz museum or something?" I think you say, and you
He
say
says,
you
"Can I go to Jazz Fest?" And
jazz fest.
for those viewers who are out there, if you are looking for a genuine perspective on how Black people experience the world and how they think about their history, New Orleans Jazz Fest is not necessarily the place. I would recommend a number of museums.
Yeah, you might want to go there, but
You
that
could
might
start
not be
with
the best
museums,
place.
you
But
could start with
yeah,
your personal relationships, but going to a
yeah.
jazz fest to learn about Black history is
Well,
not the
his,
place.
and I don't want to spoil it either for viewers because I hope we've given you lots of reasons, listeners, to check this film out. But his reaction to your response is quite remarkable and quite
Maybe let's
unfathomable.
spoil it. We can spoil
Okay,
it.
go spoil it. Go.
He does not. He responds. My response is. He asks, "You've come all this way to see how we see the world. What
He's
could we
trying to
possibly
empathize with you,
do?"
CJ.
I mean, it is a moment of genuine empathy.
It is, I think.
And he says, "What could we possibly do to see things from your perspective?" And I say simply, we could go to a slavery museum. Louisiana is home to all of these plantations, and there's an incredible plantation called the Whitney that has transformed itself into a museum and does what most plantations don't do, which is give a whole tour and focus on the lives of the enslaved. So I say back to him, well, let's just go to a slavery museum. And he is firmly against it and thinks that it's all bull. And I
Yeah, he's
think that
against it,
that
all right.
film hits for folks because it shows that this narrative of let's just meet in the middle, I'm responding in good faith, you're in good faith, I'll come see it from your perspective. I think that scene resonates because it feels like relationships that they've had of folks who are upholding white supremacy aren't actually interested in seeing life from the perspective of someone who is oppressed. It is not a genuine desire to actually meet in the middle. And I think that's something that we're playing with the film and we're playing with in the title of the film.
CJ, can you help me?
Spoiled.
There we go. Yeah, hashtag spoiled. By
Hashtag
the way, I
spoiled.
love that. I love the early hashtag. Sorry, I'm not sorry. That's got to be
Thank
one of my
you.
favorite hashtags of all time. Now, yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you. Yeah, Robert E. Lee is the embodiment of the hashtag sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, I'd love to have seen his Twitter account.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. But if we deleted any of those tweets now, that's destroying history.
Yeah, exactly. So can you how would you define white supremacy? Can it be done? I mean, this is the whole thing is complicated. I think one of the takeaways for me from this was, and I think this is where I was going with Thomas's part of his story in your film. How do you convince someone who's on, and I hate to do the dualistic notion here, but how do you convince somebody who's on the other side? Can you? Do you just present an argument? Are you preaching to the converted? Your dad even talks about hope at the end of the film, and I think there's a big question mark around that. And I, I, I don't know. Am I too arrogant, or do I think too much of myself to think I can change the world? I mean, I still feel like I can. In some, right? I mean, anyway, I don't want to answer my own question, but I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Did you bring me on just to answer whether you can change the world?
That's right.
It's a personal
CJ,
struggle.
just so we're clear, this
Your
interview
therapist
all
is
about
like,
me.
stop bringing it up. Okay,
That's
stop
right.
bringing it up. And you're like, I have a show.
That's
I'll bring it up on the show.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can no
first
longer
of all,
afford therapy. I'm doing it through my podcast. It's out now.
that's what podcasts are. But a couple of things. I think that white supremacy, white white people talk about white supremacy as if it is just the KKK. There is a definition of white supremacy about men marching in the dark with torches going, "You will not replace us." And I think most white people think that is white supremacy. What I am involved with is not white supremacy. But white supremacy isn't just that fringe. White supremacy is a story that we tell in America about the past. White supremacy is a story that we tell about how black people really haven't gone through something terrible, or that if they were going through something terrible, it is over now and they just need to get over it and stop bringing it up, because when they bring it up, it's divisive. So I think the film is getting folks to realize how many of us are wrapped up still in white supremacy. And there's no clearer example of that than monuments to enslavers that still exist on our landscape, whose highest concentrations are all in cities with the highest concentrations of black people: New Orleans, Richmond, Atlanta. Like, that is white supremacy. And white supremacy is also the thing that makes you not only look away from what happened to black people in the past, but what is happening to black people now. You do not have to hate black people to be a white supremacist. You just have to consistently not believe them. So when folks are saying, oh, George Floyd, why was he resisting? Or, why was this other black man? Why did he run? Like, that is a version of white supremacy as well. That it is the oldest force in America that tells us, look away, look away, look away. Shout out to the makers of the song Dixie. So that is what the film is about. And that is what we are trying to spotlight. And I began this film, and for most of the making of the film, very much believed there are folks on the other side who you can convince. Now that we are rolling out the film, and I'm on the other side of going to all these plantations and, Civil War reenactments and talking for years and years to people who ascribe to white supremacy, I don't know if I believe that we can convince people on the other side, and I don't think it's our job. I think that those folks are lost in a dream. And the question is, where do you spend your energy? So, David, you can absolutely change the world, but you will do so less quickly if you believe that your energy is best spent on people who don't believe that racism is real. Our film talks to people in the middle. Our film talks to people who haven't really thought it out. No one's going to come out of this film and be like, you know what? I'm going to leave my Confederate heritage group. But folks will come out of this going, you know what? I hadn't really thought about it. I grew up on this whole states' rights thing. It didn't make sense then. And now this film shows me that that's straight up propaganda. Our film will not work for Thomas Taylor, but it might work for his kids, for his grandkids. And I think that should be the model of change. It's not a green book. How do we make white supremacists' heart grow 3 sizes? I do think it is about, how do you just tell the truth out loud? And how do you empower Black and brown and queer people to realize that we can stand against this? Since George Floyd was murdered, over 100 Confederate monuments have come down. That's power. And I think our model of change needs to be focused on, what can we get accomplished when we are no longer worried about what is needed to change a white supremacist's opinion.
So, okay, I have to ask it, and we
Does that
got to
make
wrap
sense?
up. It does, and we got to wrap up in a couple of minutes. And so much wise advice. How did you wind up as a comedian? You don't need to answer that. Like, honestly, man, you should be lecturing. You should be writing. You're making films. I'm so thrilled about that. But honestly, there's just what's the word? Sagaciousness. There you go. How's
Ooh,
that?
sagacious. I love it. That
Sagacious.
that
Come
word
on.
sounds nasty, but
It
it's very
does.
academic.
It does. I love it. And you
I'm
might have
feeling
to.
sagacious,
You
baby.
might have to consult your local librarian to find out what it means. I'm
Oh
not
yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah. Do not
Yeah.
use the internet. Go to your
Yeah.
library to figure out what
So
sagacious
I
means.
gotta ask this last question, and I know you got to wrap. We got to go, and what a pleasure meeting you and getting to chat about the film. And honestly, I hope everybody sees it. Is hope then? I think I heard this. Is hope then about the future? It's really rooted in not spending my time convincing somebody of the right propositional argument and pulling out those documents or showing them the inscription on the White League statue, but actually saying, you know what? No, this is about what's next. This is about stepping into the future.
Yes. A quick logistical plug. We are at Tribeca June
Nice.
19th.
Thank
And
you.
we are on POV on PBS on the night of July 5th. And
Beautiful.
I say that in a wrap up just to be like, you have an opportunity. If you are excited about this, go see the film. But I'm asking you not because I need you to see the film, but because that is where we will be extending this conversation. And I do think that the question about hope is, we are the organizers in New Orleans who have successfully gotten these statues down. And the historians that we talk to all say essentially the same thing, which is, this is a truth test. Can we
Nice.
tell the truth about aspects of America that are messy? If we cannot tell the truth about literally the clearest, worst thing, which is slavery, how the hell are we going to tell the truth about the present? If your whole understanding about being good and a good American and a good Southerner requires you to look away from what has happened to Black people in the past, how are you understanding what is happening to them in the future? How are you understanding what is happening to them right now? And I think that is the question before us. It's not, should we have hope? Is white supremacy going to win? It is, the central question is, can we be honest? Do we have what it takes to
Good.
be honest out loud
Authentic.
in public? And we see that when folks are honest, like Nicole Hannah-Jones in the 1619 Project, they are punished. We are seeing a conservative backlash saying, teach our kids less. Do not teach them that they are white. Do not teach them the history of white supremacy. So the question before us, in regards to the police that continue to kill Black people, in regards to what is happening in our schools is, are we going to look away, or can we look it in the face and tell the truth?
Honest, out loud in public. We've been talking to CJ Hunt here today. What honestly thrilling to have you on the show, man. Really,
I've loved it.
I hope you come back. Love to do a part 2.
I will absolutely come back. It may take a while before my next film because these things apparently take a little while. But I will absolutely be back.
Can I start a Kickstarter campaign for you on getting you a new microphone? Can we do that?
Oh yeah. That's been my long game in coming on. I just need that mic money.
Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you. Everyone check out the Kickstarter for the microphone.
Absolutely.
Thanks, David. I really appreciate it. This has been great.
Well, there you have it. My interview with CJ Hunt. What a pleasure it was to have him on the show. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please give us a thumbs up on YouTube if that's where you're listening. If you're listening on iTunes or Acast or Spotify, leave us a review. We'd really appreciate it. It's so important. What a pleasure it was to have CJ on the show. We had a truckload of fun, I think, talking about some pretty serious issues, and his brilliant and beautiful, moving, compassionate, and really funny new film, The Neutral Ground. It's one of those, it's a great film. It's an important film. You need to check it out. And don't forget, you can watch it in the US on pbs.org, and also in Canada through something called the WNED Passport. So check that out, WNED.org for our Canadian listeners. And if you want to find out more about the film, neutralgroundfilm.com. What a pleasure. Once again, CJ, thanks for your time today. Thank you for listening to Face to Face. My name is David Pack.